Ooh. Ticonderoga Dixon, number 2. Soft, but sharp. I love a brand new, beautifully sharpened pencil. I love all the potential just humming inside this thing. What poems are waiting inside this pencil? What equations and grocery lists and love notes are stored inside here? Don't forget the eraser. I delight in the soft eraser. You don't want one of those hard, dried up erasers that just smear everything around you. A good eraser keeps me humble. A good eraser keeps me from missing the mark. I need both ends to do my work. You knew that Henry David Thoreau literally made his mark in the world with pencils, right? The Thoreau family business was pencils, but because the local graphite in New England wasn't very high quality, the American-made pencils weren't as desirable as the European pencils. Nonetheless, the Thoreau Pencil Company was successful enough that they were able to pay for Henry David's tuition to Harvard. And then after he got out of school, he went to try and start teaching, but he quickly washed out because he wouldn't beat the students. So he went back to the family business, and he figured out a way of how to stabilize the graphite mixing it with clay to make a superior pencil. And their pencils sold so well that he was actually able to self-publish a couple of books. Sold so well, it gave him the money to go and build that little hut out on the side of the pond, live out in the margins of society for a couple of years. His books did not sell very well during his lifetime, but a lot of people bought his pencils. And now, today, the pencil is like the emblem, the symbol of education. And Unitarian Universalists adore education. We are people of the Word and many, many other words. And we are people of the book and pretty much every other book. And we consider education to be one of our most holy, sacred endeavors. And I'm not being glib here. There are deep theological underpinnings to why we value education so dearly. We believe that people are born curious, and we believe that people can change. And this is very different from theologies that contend that people and brains are somehow fixed. And this is very different from theologies that consider that curiosity is inherently problematic, probably sinful. We believe that our lived experience and that our lived observations are just as important to study as any scripture. And this is very different from theologies that say such things as revelation is sealed, or that scripture alone holds ultimate moral authority. We actually believe that your lived experience can be your scripture. We believe that we are in relationship with one another, and that what affects one will eventually affect us all. And this is very different from theologies that would say that the only important relationship is the self with the self, or the self with some separated deity. Because of this, when any one of us is oppressed or denied access to the richness of life, we know that it is going to affect the rest of us, and so we become very concerned. We also believe that what you believe is less important than how you behave, how you treat the world around you. This is why we often, you'll hear Unitarian Universalists emphasize deeds, not creeds. And this is very different from theologies that insist upon correct thought or fixed beliefs, rigid adherence to doctrine. Right? Finally, we understand that limiting curiosity, limiting who has access to education, limiting what gets taught, we consider that to be problematic, maybe even a sin, because we understand that limiting access to education is the first means to control and oppress people. Women especially around the world. Women are controlled and oppressed by being denied access to education. We also know that one of the greatest investments to improve maternal health and infant health and outcome is educating women. That is true in sub-Saharan Africa, and it is true here in the Texas Panhandle. So other than improved infant outcome, why is there so much debate about education? Why do we still struggle? For a while now, we have been operating under the notion that if we made really excellent education available to all students, we would be doing our best. And so there's a big push because it was held that with better schools, all of the students' test scores would just shoot up. And that with more dedicated funding, better teaching, better test scores, that families would be lifted out of poverty. And that we'd have this beautifully informed populace. And all of us would be making wise decisions in our public and civic lives. And wouldn't that be wonderful? But that's not happening. Despite rigorous testing, despite lots of charitable dollars funneled into education, and despite having created a lot more paperwork for our teachers, we're not seeing the kind of improvement that we'd have expected. And that's actually because education alone cannot lift up our people. It's because the single biggest predictor of educational success is household income. And right now, income inequality has grown to a level where the majority of households are struggling to make ends meet. We cannot expect our schools to compensate for this economic sleight of hand that we have grown numb to in the past 40-some years. And charity is but a charming little misdirection of our attention for the very wealthy, the Gates, the Waltons, the Koch brothers. They can give money to educational programs as long as they don't actually have to give up their disproportionate access to income. We don't need more testing for our children. We need better wages for their parents. We don't even really necessarily need more science, math, education, and technology programs, because really the greatest job growth is in low-skilled job sectors. So instead of challenging everyone to go out and become an engineer, we actually need to pay our lower-skilled workers a living wage so that they can provide a stable home environment for their kids, so that we pay them enough so that they can feed, clothe, shelter, and actually spend time with their families. We do not need more charitable giving for educational initiatives. We need economic reforms that will tax corporations and the wealthiest individuals. We need to check that growing income inequality gap. And we should probably pay our teachers as if they were among our greatest agents of change, right? Maybe we could even untie some of the legislative bonds on around their wrists, because lesson plans from a legislature don't necessarily reach the kid who's standing in front of you who has been to 5 schools in 1 year. Here's what education really does. It changes individual lives. Each person who studies, each person who learns is changing. And it makes individuals better able to think critically and ultimately to become creators of great beauty. Instead, our teachers are being asked to teach for testing instead of teaching for change. We've been attempting to legislate for success, and that's just not how it works. When a student learns how to hold and how to write with a pencil, they learn the power of their own voice. A student holding a pencil becomes aware of the power of their own agency. They learn that their ideas can become words, can become sentences, can become stories, that can become persuasive arguments, that can become the narrative to their lived experience, can even become the scripture by which they live their lives. And a whole classroom of students holding their pencils, each one with a different story, each one with different gifts. We need all of them for us to thrive. Or we can just teach them to bubble in the answers on the standardized tests. Because here is why education policies are so fraught. There are many people who consider that curiosity is sinful. There are many people who think that it is easier to control a person who has not learned to think critically. There are people who are uncomfortable with any book other than their Bible, because here's the problem with any other book. You don't know what's inside it until you open it, and then it's too late. This is why it's important to equip our students with pencils, lots of pencils, and paper, lots of paper. Lots of pencils. You break one, you pick up another. You tear that piece of paper, you pick up another. We need lots of pencils, lots of paper, lots of stories, lots of poetry, lots of equations, and lots of theories. We need to show our students the breadth of human experience. And we need them to know that they are invited and expected to add to this. And the same is true for all of us here. Here in this room, what do we do now? Sharpen your pencils and get busy. Write a note. Draw pictures. Just write in a journal. Find out what's been stored up inside you. Maybe there's a letter to a friend that needs to be written. Maybe there's a letter to the editor. Maybe there's a quick sketch of your beloved. Maybe you're ready to write out the menu and the grocery list for the dinner that you plan to cook for your friends. Sharpen your pencils and find your voice. Write out the story of your family for the future generations. Copy a poem onto a piece of paper and then read that every day for a week, and then copy out the next poem and read that. That's a form of one type of spiritual practice, which we will be covering in classes that I will begin in September, but more on that later. Perhaps you will use your pencil to speak your mind or to open up your heart. We need people who can do both of these things. We need people to write out their anger and people to draw their sadness. We need both of these to survive the challenges ahead. We will need reason and we will need humor. But most of all, we will need you to realize how powerful and beautiful you are. So doodle, sketch, outline, draft, erase the things that aren't working. But start by using a pencil to access your power and your beauty. We need this, all of us, because that is how we will be stronger together. May it be so, and blessed be.